Welcome to the Rewards Master. Today I'm going to do a video on my own point evaluations for how much points are worth with different programs based upon solely business and first class international travel. One of the things that always frustrates me when I look at the point valuations by the Points Guy and other sources online is that they're averaging in things that I don't use my points for. So that when they say they're worth 1.7 cents a piece or 1.4 cents a piece, they're kind of averaging the business class flights along with domestic travel. And I pretty much pay for my own domestic travel, or I can get even better value than that on domestic travel if I do it strategically. So I thought it might be helpful to others to look at what might be a more accurate potential point valuation if you're just reserving your points and trying to get amazing value on amazing flights overseas in business and first class cabins. So if you would, please hit the like and subscribe button. I'm about 700 subscribers marching to 1,000. That would help me immensely, and I'd appreciate it very much. And then buckle up and let's look and see where I've come out on these. Okay, as we mentioned, points values that are typically provided online are very helpful in that they look at, and they do it much more scientifically than I've done it. They look across a lot of programs and they figure all their different flights, and they're figuring in both great redemptions and bad redemptions. But what if a person just did the great redemptions? And that's kind of what my travel style is all about. Now, others are trying to just save on travel everywhere they go and maybe not have to pay for things at all. And that's great. In that particular endeavor, that is a great motive. However, for me, I have the funds and I have the budget to be able to go ahead and pay for the less valuable flights and hotels and things of that nature. So I reserve my points to kind of provide a quality of experience that I couldn't afford on my own. So I could afford to go in economy to wherever we're going to go on vacation overseas, but I want to go in style. I want to go at a level that I would never be able to pay for. So I decided to save my points back for this purpose, and I've done my own point evaluation. Now, let me tell you, as we dive into this, there really are a few conditions that need to be considered first for these point values to be helpful to anyone. Because if you're just looking to get a flight on a particular day from somewhere in the States to somewhere else in the States or even overseas, and you're not flexible on where you're going or you're not flexible on the time and you don't want to pay anything for it, then these valuations really won't be very helpful to you at all. But if you're a person who has flexibility in time, who has flexibility in just saving your points back for great value redemptions, then this is probably, I would hope, a little more helpful than just a valuation that just looks at all the different potential uses as one. So let's look at some of the conditions that are necessary. First of all, for this to be true, I think a person has to have some money for travel. In other words, you're not looking to spend nothing on going from place to place. You're able to spend some money, but you're wanting to have an experience that is one beyond what you would normally be able to afford. And this is because some of these are going to require some taxes and fees that could be as high or close to as high as maybe half the value of what you pay for an economy ticket. So there's got to be some money reserved for that. You also have to be willing to take things like positioning flights and things, and that's going to cost some. And that brings up the second condition, and that is you have to be willing to reposition. To make this valuable, you've got to be willing to go from your home airport to whatever airport you can find a great deal from. And so that requires buying an inexpensive flight or using points for an inexpensive flight in order to get the outsized value. And that's just kind of essential for these valuations to be in any way remotely accurate. Thirdly, you have to have a lot of points and you have to be earning a lot of points, because you have to have points in reserve to be able to use them when you find the good deals, which leads us to the biggest one of all. For these valuations to have any meaning at all, to be even remotely accurate, a person has to be flexible. In other words, you have to be willing to go to the places where you find a great deal, and you have to be willing to go to those places when you find the great deal. So if you're constrained with a job or with family or whatever it may be, where you can't go to some place whenever you find the deal, you can't use your vacation time whenever you like, maybe you're restricted to summer break or you're restricted to spring break or whatever it may be, then you're probably not going to be able to find these deals because they're not going to give their high value flights that they can sell for a higher amount to people in the points and miles game to book for cheap. It's just a business decision, and you can't really blame them for that. So the other thing that we're going to add, the fifth kind of condition, is these are based upon two people traveling. Now, you might be able to find, and some people do find great value for like a family of 5 or a family of 3 or whatever it may be. But this is particularly easier the less people going. So if you're a solo traveler or if there's just 2 of you, it's going to be exponentially easier than if there's 3, which is going to be easier than if there's 4, and it's going to be easier than if there's 5. So with those conditions, I think we can dive into what I've figured to be some of my own point valuations. Now, as I dive into this, let me explain. These are for my own use. I'm not saying you'll get this value out of these things. This is just kind of my unscientific way of figuring it out. And I've done some math, but the math may not be exactly accurate, and different redemptions are going to have different valuations. So this is kind of a generalization of the programs that I'm very familiar with and that we've used and the point values I've gotten out of them. Now, sometimes I've gotten much lower and sometimes I've gotten much higher. So I had to kind of look at a standard. So the standard that I used on this is I'm figuring a one-way international business class flight would approximately cost $3,000. Now, you can find some that are cheaper. I have seen business class flights that are $1,900, $1,800. But some of them are $7,800, $8,000, $9,000. So I think the average you're going to find is around, and this is just my own guess, like I said, just what I use for my own valuations. It's not a hard, fast rule, but I think around $3,000 is the average value. Now, on the programs that are domestic programs, Delta, United, American, Alaska, those ones I don't reduce it by taxes and fees, because the taxes and fees are negligible. They're just almost inconsequential. Because, I mean, with the programs based in the US, it's like $5.60 or $12.40. And even with Alaska, you got to pay that $12 booking fee. But, you know, it really doesn't make much difference. So I didn't take those out. Now, on the others, for Air France and Avianca, some of those, they have a little bit higher taxes and fees. So I did take those out of the $3,000 before I figured kind of what I think of as the average valuation. So let's dive into the United States-based programs. And the first one I'm going to mention is Delta Airlines. Now, Delta, I just put them on here because somebody's going to ask, and a lot of people fly Delta. I like to fly Delta. They have a great hard product. And they have a great soft product. At least in the United States, it's better than everybody else's. I mean, you get a better seat and you get better service, but you pay for that. Delta, their points program, Sky Miles, is often called Sky Pesos because it's just so bad. I mean, they're just not worth very much. So I didn't even do a lot of research on them because I've done a lot of research in the past. So I'm just going to put them at a very low valuation. I think they're worth about 1.2 cents a piece. And that's it. Because I never, ever, ever find great value overseas redemption. Now, I've heard some people with their flash sales have found them, but I mean, I haven't. So to me, I just don't even hardly look at Delta when I'm looking for overseas business or first class redemptions. But after that, it starts to get interesting. Now we look at United Airlines. Now, I've been a flyer with United for many, many years, had status with them for a long, long time. So I'm very familiar with their program. They did a devaluation a few years ago, and that was disappointing because you used to be able to get pretty good business class for 60-something thousand, but now it's gone up. So The valuation is based upon business class flights being around either 80 or 88,000 points. So figuring that at a $3,000 value, I come up with a point value for United of about 3.4 cents per point. Now, some of the rest on here are going to be better than that, but I think that's pretty good. So I kind of saved my United points, and that means Chase points can be worth that as well because they transfer to United. So about 3.4 cents per point is what I figure United to be worth, at least to me. Now, when it comes to American Airlines, they're one of my favorite. In fact, if I had to name a favorite, Alaska's growing on me. It's getting close, but just right above them still is American Airlines. Now, their points are harder to earn because you got to have one of their credit cards or use shopping portal or their hotel platform or something because nobody transfers to them. So maybe that's why they're so precious. But American Airlines, even in the States, I still get about 2.5 or more cents per point on my value when it comes to taking domestic flights. But when it comes to international, and that's what we're focusing on here, they have an extremely high point value. And I base this on the fact that you can get, especially if you're willing to go last minute, which I often have tried to do with them lately, is you can get some great flights like Qatar for 42.5 if you're not flying from the United States. We're doing one of those. You can get some flights for 50,000. You can get some flights for 60,000. So I averaged those together and it came out to an amazing 6 cents per point value. So my American points, I try to save for those 6 cents per point on average. And sometimes you're getting a little less, sometimes a little more, but those are outstanding redemption values for One World partners and also sometimes for American flights themselves. Now we come to Alaska. Now Alaska was a little harder for me to figure because I do use them now for domestic travel a lot. And I think that I'm getting about 3.5 cents per point average, even on domestic travel, because some of their flights are 4,500 points in the States, some are 7,500, some are 12,500. And if you look at the price of those tickets, that's a really, really good value. But when it comes to the subject of this video, which is international business travel, you've got three numbers to work with. You can sometimes get it for 45,000 points, sometimes for 55,000 points, and sometimes for 70,000 points. And at those numbers, it comes out when you figure an average flight being around $3,000 and you do the math, it comes out just under American with about 5.4 cents per point in value. So I still think those Alaska points for international are really, really good. We just booked one in business class from Europe back to the US, 55,000 points. So they're very, very, very good. Now, when we look at Air France is another one of my favorite programs. They just went through a devaluation, but it came out still pretty good at the end with maybe even a little bit more award availability. But Air France is the first program we're going to start pulling out the taxes and fees, and they aren't terribly bad. But after I do that and looking at their redemption value, when I'm looking at flights on Air France and their Flying Blue program, I'm looking for their 60,000 point flights. So those are available. You have to look around for them. They're not available all the time. That's why you got to have a lot of points in a lot of places to be very flexible. But when you can find those, figuring a flight's about $3,000, that comes out to about a 4.5 cent per point value, which is still very, very good. Next, you look at Avianca. Avianca, you got to pull out the taxes and fees. You also got to pull out a booking fee, but you can get business class flights between the US and Europe for about 63,000 points. And that gives them a value of about 4.6 cents per point. Now we look at Air Canada. Air Canada is a great program. What I love about them is they seem to have more award availability at their 70,000 point value. And so you can book flights from the US and Europe, 70,000 points. Sometimes you can even get great flights over to the Far East and, going to Taipei or over to Japan, some of those, and you can get the 70,000 point value. And when you look at that and you pull out the taxes and fees, you end up with, for me, about a 4 cent per point value, which is still very good. Now, when you consider all of these, I think that to consider transferable currencies, they're always considered to be very good at like 2.2 is what they'll sometimes say American Express points are worth. Or they'll say Capital One are worth 1.85, or they'll say that Chase are worth 2.0, or that City points are worth 1.8 cents per point. Well, to me, those point values don't matter either, because if I'm transferring them over to one of these partners to be able to use it at one of these higher cent per point values. The other thing, though, is that I often use transfer bonuses, which ups that value. So I'm not going to figure that into this valuation, but I think at what we've seen, you're looking at a floor of around 4 cents per point in value for Capital One, or for American Express, or Citi, or Chase, or I guess I don't have Wells Fargo, but even they would probably fit into this because they transfer to some of these partners. So all of those transferable points, I figure, are worth about 4 cents per point for this purpose if you're just looking for outsized value in business and first class. Now, all of this may totally be irrelevant in your situation, and that's okay. I mean, different travel styles, they all have great value. And you know what? If you're enjoying your points, enjoy them in whatever way you so desire. It's still a great hobby. But for me, I'm looking for outsized value to take trips I could pay for in economy and to take those trips at a level that I couldn't afford to do. And that's what the point game is all about to me. So you can take these point values and maybe they are accurate for you. Like I said, it's not to the detail that the points guy and others do it. But for me, that's what these points are worth. So I'd love to hear down in the comments, what value have you found from your points? Are they worth that to you? Or maybe you have a totally different travel style. Maybe this is irrelevant. That's okay too. So let me know down in the comments. Don't forget again to like and subscribe. I have a channel membership where I actually give great point values that I find for different locations, and I let members kind of look into that. There's a description in this video description about how you can join the channel. It's only $2.99 a month. You can cancel anytime. So if you'd like to become an RM Insider, you can look into that. But please hit the like and subscribe button. I appreciate you, and go and spend your points and have a great time. That's what this hobby is all about. We'll see you here next time.